The ACE satellite monitors the various parameters of the solar wind: magnetic field strength, magnetic orientation. These are essential for predicting the strength of the impact of any solar event on Earth.
However, the satellite was only designed for research and is now reaching the end of its life.
These storms happen all the time during solar maximum. The ACE satellite detects them, and that's what will give us advanced warning.
Advanced warning of what?
Impact.
How advanced?
Anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour.
Oh, no, wait. You're telling me we don't know when these things are going to hit us?
It's complicated. It could change its speed. It could slow down.
Well, that's going to make 8 million New Yorkers feel better.
And not just New Yorkers. The whole planet is desperate to know what only the ACE satellite can tell them. Despite the size of the storm, there is no way of knowing whether it will be damaging until they know its polarity. Just like a magnet, the solar storm has either a north or southward polarity. ACE can tell which way it is oriented. North, and it could bounce harmlessly off the magnetosphere and back out into space. But the other option is what everyone fears.
When you get a storm that has an extremely large southward magnetic field component and it's very fast, you know you're going to have a super big geomagnetic storm.
Until the storm hits ACE, there's just no way of knowing. The main force of the storm, the CME, is still several hours away. But here on Earth, the solar radiation is continuing to wreak havoc.
The damaged plane is seconds away from landing here in runway 3. It's confirmed 2 of the engines damaged by the solar storm have failed. There are unconfirmed reports that it might have affected the braking system. Now we know there are 318 people on this plane. I'm very concerned.
If you're using the most advanced technology, which means electronics, you could have upsets. You could have failures. For example, if an airplane engine shut down or 2 engines shut down, is it probable? Yes, it is.
No. The plane has overshot the runway and has hit the freeway. I'm not sure if it's hit any cars. My God, cars are swerving around it.
With the potential for a catastrophic blackout only hours away, the mayor has to make a tough decision. Does she advise people to leave work or stay put? Millions of dollars of lost business are at stake if she is wrong. And if she is right, she could be saving hundreds of lives. As the solar storm approaches, authorities begin planning for the worst.
We need to shut down. Just do it.
Hold on. Just give us an overview of the logistics. Okay, go on.
I suggest we start looking at stockpiling gas in case the pumps go down. And putting water supplies in areas around the city. People stuck in elevators and on subways, that's going to be a major issue.
We'll send them in.
Hospitals will be a #1 concern.
I'm sorry it took me so long to get here.
Have a seat.
Thank you. Look, here's what I think. It might be a good idea to consider disconnecting and shutting down from some of the city's electrical stations.
A deliberate blackout.
Exactly. We shut them down before the solar storms do.
Why shut them down?
Well, if they're not on when the storms hit, they can't be damaged.
What about emergency services, hospitals, and traffic?
We've had plenty of space weather in the past, and we haven't shut off the grids. This is crazy.
Well, if this thing hits us, the grid systems are going to take an almighty kick. We could be left without power at all, period.
For how long?
Well, for as long as it takes to build new transformers. We're talking months here, maybe even years.
Shutting down a power station could save the transformers attached to it. Normally, power stations send high-voltage electricity down the line to transformers that convert it into low voltage for consumers. The U.S. has around 2,000 large transformers, and these will be the vulnerable points in the power grid when the solar storm arrives. Around the world, tens of thousands of transformers face the same threat of destructive overload.
In the world right now, we have a manufacturing capability to produce somewhere in the neighborhood of about 70 to 100 of these large transformers per year.
Turning off one power station will not only save a few transformers, but more importantly, after the storm, it could be the only source of power for the entire city.
It's a bit like Russian roulette. Intentionally shutting down the grid would be an unprecedented thing to consider. If I were a system operator for a large grid, that would be a once-in-a-career decision.
A power station takes around an hour to shut down, so any decision will have to be made before the true destructive force of the storm is known.
Look, we've been over and over this. A deliberate blackout is not an option. It's a gamble on a theory.
You don't have to do it now. We have a couple of hours to make a decision.
Look, the mayor has already given you her answer. How much more information do you need?
This is the biggest CME anyone has ever seen. No one knows for sure what's going to happen to us when this hits.
Well, what do we know?
It's going to hit the A satellite in a couple of hours. Look, if this storm is big, it's really going to be hell on earth for a long time now.
If I was in the captain's chair, having to make that very, very difficult, complex decision, I'd want as much objective information as possible.
I'll walk you outside.
I want to know what are the consequences if I don't do this, and when do I run out of time to make this decision?
If we do a deliberate blackout, what will that do to emergency services? Fire, police, hospitals?
We have backup generators that'll last for about 72 hours.
I'll need to call the governor. We'll also need to look into putting the National Guard on standby. Can you just power down Brooklyn in isolation?
I can coordinate that, yeah.
You go back, Peter, and I'll be in touch.
Sure.
Oh, Peter, if I'm not in touch, well, you seem like a man of initiative. You understand me?
Of course.
Making the call to have a controlled blackout in one area is a gamble. It's never been done before.
The odds are that you would be wrong in taking that action, that the storm would be manageable and didn't require such drastic action. The other side of it is a possibility of long-term devastating impact.
The many recent disasters around the world have taught authorities one important lesson.
The question of whether we'll get some sort of social chaos will depend on what kind of job the officials are doing in terms of being reassuring, being a presence, saying, yes, we're having a big problem, but we're going to solve this together, is one big factor in this.
It helps if everyone is on the same page.
Where's Cross?
He went out when you did.
Councilman Cross, what is this solar storm we keep hearing about?
Well, there's potentially a very devastating solar storm approaching the Earth, which could knock out the electrical grid on a wide scale. And we'll let you know as soon as we have some more information. You'll have to excuse me. I must get back to my meeting. Thanks.
Look at these power surges.
Hey, Tyra, it's me.
Peter, there's surges all over.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you tell people to power down.
You know, you have the opposite effect, and people start calling each other. Do me a favor. Call me as soon as you get more results from Ace.
I gotta call the mayor.
I'm here to reassure you that power crews are hard at work. But this solar storm has affected satellites, and that's why things aren't working the way we're used to. Our emergency teams are ready. Thank you.
The CME storm has hit the ACE satellite, and it's 240 nanoteslas. It's 3 times bigger than anything we've measured before. And the field is southward.
A southward magnetic field, 240 nanotesla, is going to be mind-boggling, leaving us fully exposed to the fury of the sun.
A nanotesla is a measure of electromagnetic power. The biggest solar storm, recorded in 1859, is estimated to have been around 200 nanoteslas. The one now moving toward Earth is unprecedented.
All right, let's get to work. Get Peter on the phone, make sure he knows. You three to the second grid.
Okay, let's go.
First grid, go. Check the monitors, make sure everything's okay.
People are really going to be scared. It's going to be beyond what we've seen before. So we can hope that we have prepared properly. Hope we're right.
Tara, pick up. Tara!
Go for Tara.
I can't get through to the mayor. We need to shut down.
Peter, we cannot power down without the mayor's permission. We could be prosecuted.
We have no choice. Just do it.
Will one man's decision cost him his job?
Shutting down.
Or make him a hero? Find out when Perfect Disaster continues. The solar storm is seconds from Earth.
Are you ready?
When a renegade power station takes steps that might save lives. The data is clear. The perfect solar storm is powerful and has the potential to cause damage to grids around the world. In Brooklyn, the initiative of one man could make a difference. With communications disrupted and time running out, few other power stations will be so prepared.
Are you ready?
Shut down in 15 seconds. Take out 2 and 3.
Shutting down.
The controlled blackout has left Brooklyn in darkness, but there are still lights on in the rest of the city. The CME is now only minutes away, and still no one can be sure how big the effect will be.
Authorize a deliberate blackout for the city of New York in Brooklyn to protect a region of the city from a potential destructive power surge.
I am not blacking out the whole of New York because there actually isn't any way of knowing whether this grid system will be affected by it or not.
Meanwhile, elsewhere in New York, people are gathered in the streets to watch what is promised to be
The most spectacular light show known as an aurora ever seen.
The aurora is a rare and beautiful sight, usually seen near the poles, but this one reaches right down toward the equator. It will be visible almost everywhere on the dark side of the Earth, but its beauty is a cruel deception. The aurora is formed when billions and billions of highly charged particles smash into the oxygen and nitrogen atoms that make up the atmosphere. As the particles collide, they react and release a burst of light energy. In the upper atmosphere, the aurora appears red and green. Closer to Earth, blue and purple. Combined, they create an undulating light show 100 miles high.
We'll be going live to Europe as this spectacular display covers the night side of the Earth.
Je suis ici à New York. Nous sommes tous en dehors, regardant devant cet arc-en-ciel. C'est merveilleux ici.
Beautiful.
Sure is.
What's so funny?
Well, take a good look at it. It's probably the last little bit of electrical light we see for months.
If we think of this as the beginning of something that's a global catastrophic event where we're going to be basically out of electricity for the foreseeable future, then what would have otherwise been a beautiful image of lights in the sky will become a sign of an ominous and dangerous and uncertain threat.
As the energy from the solar storm hits, it creates massive waves through the Earth's magnetic field. These induce powerful currents that pulse through the grid system, burning out the transformers. The biggest solar storm in history now begins the world's biggest and longest blackout. New York has an added problem: the ground on which it stands. Some of the Earth's surface absorbs electrical charge, but New York's geology is resistant to it. So most of the storm's energy remains focused on the grids above, increasing the potential for total destruction. Perfect Disaster returns after this. The full force of the solar storm is felt on Earth.
Satellite. Whoa, losing signal.
Global communications are mainly handled by satellites, television, telephones, radio, internet, aircraft, shipping, and defense systems. A worldwide communications breakdown could quickly follow the storm. As the storm disables local networks, like traffic signals, it creates dangerous scenarios on the already packed roads. As power drains from the city, more complex transport systems are thrown into deadly chaos.
There's a question of signaling on trains, flipping from a red to a green.
There's no question that a lot of people will not survive the rigors that would accompany a major global blackout. I think there's hope that we'll get through such a thing, but there's also possibility that it won't be very pretty.
Within minutes, the blackout takes hold across New York City, and the rest of the USA is plunged into darkness. Around the world, as electricity stops being generated, the modern world comes to a standstill. In densely populated cities like New York, reaching the top floor of the thousands of high-rise buildings will quickly become a matter of life and death.
Without the elevators to move them up quickly, we're going to have to walk up 20, 30, 40, 50 flights of stairs. The sick, the elderly living on upper floors, people who need dialysis, how we're going to move them.
Emergency services around the world will be taxed to the breaking point. As days turn into weeks and then months, the disaster will only get worse. The supply of food and water will soon stop, and then the real catastrophe will begin.
The water and sewage treatment plants, as both of them start to fail, will create the possibility of diseases and germs affecting the water supply. So we have a continuing cycle of deterioration here, a spiraling downward of the systems that we're dependent on. And so I think we'll eventually see a population that's getting sick and can't get the care they need and needing to go to the hospital, but the hospitals aren't working properly.
Diseases like typhoid and cholera, hepatitis and dysentery will be quick to return. As transformers across New York finally blow, backup generators for utilities like hospitals now kick in, but only for as long as the fuel lasts, usually calculated as being just 3 days.
Very straightforward reality when hospitals' electrical power systems aren't working. The more fragile the patients, the more likely they will not survive. And I hate to be blunt about it, but that's the reality of it.
In this scenario, more than 200 transformers will have been damaged in the U.S. In all likelihood, it could take 2 years to replace them. New transformers will go to the highest bidder, so it could take up to a decade for the poorest countries to get back on their feet.
This massive solar storm will take place someday. The sun is going to do what the sun's going to do. It's going to depend on how well we as mankind can prepare for this situation.
As the blackout continues, the death toll will rise. The solar storm is over, but the global disaster has only just begun.
These transformers can take a year to build under normal circumstances. There are only 5 factories in the U.S., and the UK, most of Europe, Japan, Canada, and many other countries are in the same boat that we're in. We won't have power in some parts of the U.S. for months, maybe even more than a year.
Thank you for your time, and thanks to the controlled blackout, we had transformers preserved from damage. We have a lot of work ahead.
We are here for you, and we will get through this together. Thank you, everyone.
I need to personally thank you for keeping us on the map.
So sorry. Madam Mayor, we do have business to attend to.
Could this huge event change the face of the world? I think temporarily. Temporarily may mean weeks or months, but eventually one can recover, just like we've recovered from other major events.
We are bringing in thousands of horses and wagons so that people can start moving around again. Thank you. And remember, be a neighbor.
This may not happen in your lifetime, but it's not science fiction. We know that one day in the future, the sun will unleash a terrible storm like this. There is no way we can prevent it. The next cycle of extreme solar activity is predicted to happen in 2011.